Good morning. It is a privilege to come under the authority of our elders and bring the word to you today. We have these moments where these penetrating questions storm our soul. What am I here for? What is the meaning of all of this? There must be more. Most times we're too busy to deal with these deeper questions, but there are these times where we just can't escape them. Times of great beauty and times of great sorrow. I don't know if you've ever stood underneath a dark sky and just been in awe of the billions of stars, or stood at the edge of the ocean and watched the sunset as it looked like someone painted the watercolors of the oranges fading into the pinks, or stood at the base of towering mountains and you just feel so small. Or maybe it's in the moment of that perfect song that reaches within you and it touches something deep within your soul, or being wrapped up in an embrace where you feel total love. You experience these things and it awakens something within your soul that there's so much more to this. But sometimes these questions come in the midst of sorrow. You get that unexpected expense and you wonder, how am I going to make it this month? That anxiety starts to creep in and you feel it coming back, and that fear that what if this is like the last time? When it overwhelmed me and I didn't know how to get out. You watch the child that you love make those destructive decisions and you just want to rescue them from themselves. You get the diagnosis and it doesn't look good. You fought that addiction again and again and again, and it has you in its grips one more time. Or you feel so lonely and overlooked, and you wonder if anyone even really cares. For me, my deepest sorrow was in losing my babies. The deep ache of losing children I never got to meet, and leads you to this question: this is not right. There's got to be more than this. But sometimes those deeper questions come in the midst of sorrow when you also see beauty. I was 3 months pregnant with our first child when we found out that my husband, Corey, had cancer. Throughout my pregnancy, we walked through his chemo and the depression that came along with it, and it was dark. But there was something breathtakingly beautiful about meeting our daughter against the backdrop and the darkness of cancer. It's a picture that shows that moment. We named her Charis because that is the biblical Greek word for grace. And she was such a picture of grace in the midst of suffering. But cancer wasn't unfamiliar to us. Just a few years earlier, we had walked with Corey's mom through her final battle with cancer. And if you've ever walked somebody to their death, you know the questions that come. What is this all for? What is a life worth living? I remember hearing the groans of her pain, wetting her lips so they wouldn't dry out, looking for moments when we could express our love to her when she was awake. But more than that, I remember so clearly sitting in the living room with her in her hospice bed, singing these songs of worship and not even knowing if she was coherent, but then seeing her hand raise in praise to her Jesus, the Jesus that she had loved with her entire life and was showing her love even more beautifully in her death. These moments, both painful and beautiful, lead us to the question, what am I here for? What is my purpose in life? What is a life well lived? There's this nagging fear that we'll live that that throw quote, those lives of quiet desperation, or this fear that at the end of our life, what will we have to show for it? We want to know our purpose. And the self-help industry has the answer. In fact, it knows that we are looking for purpose because they make bank. In 2021, $11.3 billion was spent on self-help, and it's estimated to grow to $14 billion by 2025. They tell you they have the answer on how to become the best you, to live your best life. You just have to buy their program. Just follow their 3 easy steps. We hear these loud voices telling us what our purpose should be, and over again, we hear it's in success. You need to be successful in the workplace. You need to dominate. Climb that ladder. Be sure you get to that point where nobody tells you what to do. If you get enough money, you can do what you want when you want to do it, and that is really finding purpose in life. Or maybe it's success in stuff, that if you make enough money that you can buy whatever you want. You can have the nicest house. You can have the nicest car. You can have the lake house. You can have everything your heart desires. He who dies with the most toys wins, right? Or maybe it's in status. You have to be successful in having the most people follow you, get the most likes. Be sure you're TikTok famous. That is the epitome of success. Or maybe it's an appearance. You have to get that hot girl bod. You have to have the right clothes and put on makeup and do all the contouring and do all the things to make you look good. Or for some of the guys out there, it's lifting weights so much that you have to buy that next size up in t-shirts because your muscles are just so big. And I don't know if you know, but there's this workout group that's at Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at like 5:30 in the morning. So if you want to, just kidding. But some say that's all too superficial. Real purpose is found in experience. It's in what you can experience in life. This was captured by my generation with the phrase that became popular, carpe diem, seize the day. It was then recycled and a couple years later came out as YOLO, you only live once, right? And as much as it's this idea of trying to grab hold of these experiences, most of the time it was just an excuse to get really bad tattoos and make really dumb decisions, right? Spring break, what? Yep. But this idea that experiences will give you meaning if you eat at the best restaurants, if you have the Instagram-worthy vacations, if you go to the right concert, then you know that is what's really living. You have to create these significant memories. But some say that's all still so superficial, and they go deeper still, and they say the real purpose in life is in relationships. You just have to find the right person, and then you will find your purpose. Our culture says purpose is in providing a life for your children that you never got to have. So you have to create this magical childhood experience. You have to have the best and most elaborate birthday parties. You better be sure you get your kids in the sports and the music lessons and the dance lessons and the travel sports. And if you don't do all of those things by the time they're 3, oh man, there's no hope for them. And you better believe that they tell you that if you have not spent $20,000 on taking your family to Disney World for a week, do you really even love them? I mean, is there love in your heart for your kids? We see this idea that there's purpose is in relationships. And even from the Christian world, we hear these voices that seem a little bit off key, that purpose is found in being blessed. That's what God has called for you. You just need to be blessed. That if you say yes to Jesus, you will be blessed in your finances. You will be blessed in your health. You will find the life that you've been looking for, and it's going to be easy. Jesus will make your dreams come true. Just say yes to Jesus, and you will find that blessing. And maybe even more commonly, we hear that it's about doing more. You need to work harder, be better. Just do good things. And if you can become a better person, then you'll find your purpose. So how do we navigate all of these voices that are shouting at us that this is the way, when some of them sound really appealing? What do we do with this deep ache that we have in the beauty and in the sorrow that there is something more? Because there is something more. There's more than just finding success or great experiences or the perfect person or the life of being good. Because we all know people who seem to have attained success in each of those areas, and yet it's not enough. They're still hungry for more. It doesn't satisfy. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, says, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. If that is so, I must take care. On the one hand, never to despise or to be unthankful for these earthly blessings, but on the other hand, never to mistake them for something else of which they are only a kind of copy or echo or mirage. I must keep alive in myself the desire for my true country, which I shall not find till after death. I must never let it get snowed under or turned aside. I must make it the main object of my life to press on to that country and help others to do the same. We are made for more than this. The restless discontent and ache within us is leading to the only one who can satisfy. And this is what the invitations have been all about. We are invited to enter into the presence of Jesus, whose unending beauty and infinite glory undoes us. Do you know him that way? Jesus invites us to stop settling for things that are only an echo of what is real. Jesus invites us to himself. So what's the answer? What is our purpose? Our purpose is to know and love Jesus, period. Nothing is worthy of all of ourselves except God alone. This truth leads us to our last invitation, the invitation to come and die. And I want to just thank Pastor Chris for leaving this invitation for me. I'm so grateful that he decided to give me a nice, light, easy invitation to wrestle with. In fact, growing up, as I watched my dad prepare sermons, he would experience the thing that he was going to be preaching on each week. And I remember him going through that. And when Pastor Chris said, "I want you to preach on the subject of come and die," I was like, "Are you sure you want that one for me?" And then even midweek, I got really, really sick. And I called Kevin and was like, "Oh, you might need to get your backup sermon ready because I don't know if we're going to make it." And Pastor Chris sent me a text and he was like, "Hey, I'm praying for you. And just so you know, I wasn't intending on you taking your sermon title literally. So please, get better." But as I've prepared, God has done a work in me. In my weakness, he is strong. And it's fitting that we talk about this on Palm Sunday, because this is the day that we celebrate Jesus coming into Jerusalem, and the crowds are shouting and praising and saying, "Hosanna, our Messiah has come. He has come to rescue us." But Jesus was celebrated for all the wrong reasons. They thought he was coming to fix their circumstances and give them this life of prosperity, to give them the life that they were dreaming of. They thought he was coming to take a crown, but really he was coming to take a cross. And isn't that how we approach Jesus? Don't we come to him and say, "Jesus, fix my circumstances, but don't get too much into my business. I still want to live my life the way I want to live it." But it wasn't just the crowd who misunderstood what Jesus had come to do. The disciples fumbled and stumbled their way towards him. We're going to be looking at Mark 8, 34 through 38 to see this invitation of Jesus. But you always want to be sure that you look at the full context, because meaning comes in context, in understanding what the whole passage is all about. And so we're going to go back a little bit. And at the beginning of this section of scripture, Jesus turns to his disciples and asks them, "Who do you say that I am?" They've been following him for a while, but they have not answered this question. Who do you say that I am? And this question that he asks his disciples is the most important question that you will ever answer in your life. Who do you say that Jesus is? And this is Peter's moment to shine. Peter knows the answer, and he's bold enough to say it. Peter says, "You are the Messiah." But don't be too proud of Peter, because after he says the right answer, he falls right on his face. Because even though he knows who Jesus is, he doesn't know what it means that he came as the Messiah. And so Jesus tells them in Mark 8, 31 through 33, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." You see, being rejected and dying didn't fit into Peter's vision of what Jesus had come to do. Peter wanted a victorious Savior. He wanted Jesus to come for a crown, and he was hoping that he was going to get one too. 3 times in Mark's gospel, Jesus tells them that he has come to die. And 3 times the disciples have responded poorly. They've missed it. And 3 times Jesus has turned and taught them that this is what it means to follow after me. Jesus says he has come to die, and the disciples don't understand. The first time, Peter rebukes him. The second time, the disciples don't understand, so they don't say anything. They kind of learned from that "get behind me, Satan" time. And then the last time, as soon as Jesus says, "This is what I've come to do, to suffer and die," James and John come up, and they're like, "Hey, Jesus, so when you're in power, can we be the number 1 and number 2 guys? Can we get that high position as well? We want to be in power too." Talk about missing the point. Jesus says he's come to die, and they're worried about their status. Isn't that just like us? And then we get to the invitation. Mark 8, 34 through 37. Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul?" Notice that Jesus says this to the whole crowd. He doesn't try to make it sound flashy or appealing or easy in order to keep his popularity. Jesus says, if you want to follow me, it starts with death. And there's no Princess Bride mostly dead either. It's dead. This separated the followers from the spectators. This isn't just for the future pastors or missionaries or the super spiritual or the extra committed. This is what it means to be a Christian. There's no Christian JV team. You either take up your cross or you don't. To be a Christian is to be a disciple. To be a disciple is to follow Jesus. And that leads us to our first point. Following Jesus will cost you everything. Not only will you have to let go of that one thing that might be the biggest barrier to you following Jesus, like we talked about last week with the rich young ruler, but you will have to let go of anything and everything that is in the way of Jesus. Jesus invites us to deny ourselves, which means you are going to die to your self-will. This means you no longer live for yourself. It will cost you your independence, your self-determination, your selfishness. 2 Corinthians 5:15 says that he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. This means you have to let go of the things that you used to put your identity, hope, and security in. Your identity is not in what you accomplish. Your security is not in how big your bank account is. Your hope is not in how great you look, in how many likes you have on social media, in how many friends you have, or even how good you are. Now, this doesn't mean you quit your job, you leave your family, and join a monastery. What it means is that everything you do in life is done out of your love for Jesus. He transforms us from the inside out. You may have the same job, but you have a different purpose in that job. But Jesus then gets a little more specific in Luke 14:26 when he says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." Whew. That's a hard text. That gets pretty personal. And this would have been even harder to hear in his original audience because for them, it was a communal culture. Your entire identity was tied up in who your family was. So the idea of hating your family was hard. But they also would have understood what Jesus was saying. He is not telling us to cut off family, even some of the ones that we wouldn't mind cutting off. He's saying that our greatest love must be him. He must come first. You have so much love for him that even the greatest love that you have for someone else here on earth doesn't even begin to compare. This doesn't lessen our love for our families. It actually calls us to something greater. I don't love my family conditionally because of how they make me feel or because of how they love me. I love them selflessly because I have experienced that love in Jesus. He continues on in Luke and says, you have to think about what this is going to cost you. Don't jump in naively. In some situations, following Jesus means that your family is going to walk away. It means that your friends are going to reject you. They're going to think you're crazy. Are you still willing to follow him? For his followers throughout the centuries, this actually did mean making that decision. Is it worth my life? Am I willing to physically die in following Jesus? What do you risk in following Jesus this way? He asks for everything because he knows that the greatest gift, your greatest joy, is in him. Everything else is just an echo. And it will be worth everything that you give up. So this last week was spring break for a lot of schools. And if you have young kids, you know the draw of spring break. We stayed in Fort Fun this week. But there have been times that we have gone and made the trek down to Florida. Now, I remember the first time we decided as a family to go to Florida. And if you know my daughter, Karis, you know that she is a bit of a homebody. She loves the comforts of home. She loves her bed. She loves the familiarity of things. And so when we told her we are going to drive to Florida and go to the beach, she wasn't so sure. She was like, it's pretty nice here. I mean, Fort Wayne has some good things. I have my toys. I can play with Legos. I have my dolls. I mean, that's fun, right? She had no idea what was in store. But the thing is, she couldn't stay in Fort Wayne and experience the shore at the same time. And so we said, we're gonna go. And she was like, okay. And if you've ever done that drive from Fort Wayne all the way to Florida, you know it's like a bajillion hours. That's a specific amount of time, bajillion. It is forever. And if you've ever driven with young children, you know how much longer it feels. It's uncomfortable. It takes forever. And there were so many moments where it was like, can we just go back? Like, what are we even doing here? Like, is this even really worth it? And then we got to the ocean. Our feet were in the sand. The waves were crashing against the shore. And it was hours of fun and joy. And it was worth it. Jesus is calling us to something great. But we have to leave the comfortable. We have to leave the familiar. We cannot experience the life that he's called us to and hold on to what we have. It will cost us everything. And along the way, there are times where you might want to go back. That you might want to say, it was a lot easier when I could just live for myself. It was a lot easier when I didn't have to think about other people. You will lose the comfort and the familiarity of the old way of doing things, and it will be hard. And you might question, is this worth it? But press on, because nothing you lose compares to gaining Jesus. The great missionary Paul knew this so well. When he decided to follow Jesus, he lost his status, his position, his friends, his personal well-being, and even his religion. Philippians 3:8-10 says, "Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ, Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, garbage, in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness of God that depends on faith, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death." And Paul knew sufferings. He knew pain. The greatest physical pain that I have ever experienced was childbirth. I've done this with 4 full-term babies, and one of them had the head the size of Jupiter. I kid you not. The nurses would measure it and be like, no, that can't be right, and measure it again. They're like, oh yeah, that's right. It was big, and it was painful. But not once after those painful births did I look down at my newborn and say, man, that was not worth it. Not once. It never happened because all of the pain was worth it. And if you have had children, you know that pain does not end with childbirth. It costs a lot. It costs pain, sleepless nights, quiet, lots of money, the shape you once had, independence, worrying about their future, the ability to leave the house on time, the ability to ever have the laundry done and put away, many, 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 many tears, and so, so much more. Being a parent is death to the old way of living, and the new way is hard, but it's worth it. And Jesus says that is only a reflection of what I have for you. It will be hard, but it will be worth it. Number 2, following Jesus starts with death. He invites you to die. Deny yourself, take up your cross. There was no other meaning for the cross besides death. It doesn't sound like a very attractive invitation. You don't see that on the pretty pastel postcards that come inviting you to Easter services. Come for our egg hunt, be prepared to die. Maybe next year, Peter. We'll work on that. The invitation requires everything, but it's worth everything. But don't miss this, because as hard as that invitation is, Jesus went first. He went first. He lived the life that we couldn't live, and he died the death that I deserved to die. I deserved that death. I deserved it for my selfishness, for my envy, for my ego, for my self-righteous striving. I deserved to be separated from God, but he made a way. And this does not start by us getting our lives together. Jesus went first. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I can't get over that. He did not wait for you to clean up your life. He did not wait until you were acceptable. He came to you when you were still a mess. He came to me when I was still a mess. How many of us have found our identity in being a pretty good person and then been crushed by the struggle to keep up the facade that we're a pretty good person? Because we know. I am nowhere near good. On my best days, I am still awful. You can ask my family. I am saved only by the grace of God. And following Jesus means death to that striving heart that thinks if I just work a little bit harder, if I just do a little bit more, then maybe Jesus will accept me. Maybe I will be enough for him. Listen to me. Nothing you do will ever make Jesus love you more. And nothing you do will ever make Jesus love you less. He loves you completely. You are not going to good deed your way to Jesus. Isaiah 64:6 says that all of our good deeds are like filthy rags. So you're a big sinner. Yup. That's who Jesus came for. So you're a big sinner, but you have been pretty good at hiding it. You put on the Sunday best, the smile. Fine, we're all fine. It's all great. Guess what? Jesus knows. You don't have to keep pretending. You aren't fooling him. And you know what? You're probably not fooling everyone else either. This is a safe place to bring all of that mess and find forgiveness and find the freedom that we keep singing about. It is in him. But how do I know? How do I know that Jesus' love is enough to cover all of the mess that I have made with my life? How do I know that his love is great enough to cover the shame that I feel? I look to the cross. I look to the cross. Hebrews 12:2 says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He endured the cross for the joy set before him, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. What is the joy set before him? I used to always think that it was the Father, but he already had perfect fellowship with the Father. What is the joy? It's you. You are his joy. You are the joy that caused him to scorn the shame of the cross. That caused him to endure the pain of the cross for the joy of being reconciled with you. You are his joy. This is the radical love that Jesus has for you that changes everything. Have you experienced that love? A love so deep that Jesus looks at you and says, my life for yours. He looks at you in the midst of your sin and says, beloved. He tells you he has so much more for you than this endless searching. Jesus said, if you want to follow me, it starts with death. We stop chasing our crowns and we take up our cross. The invitation is not an invitation to striving. It's an invitation to surrender your life and find that Jesus is better. To give up the familiar, comfortable way of living and find your treasure is in him. So number 3, following Jesus is all about worship. Mark 8:35-36. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? What do you truly worship? What is it that your purpose is all about? Most of us, our immediate reactions, well, of course, I worship God. Did you not just hear how great that time was in here? I worship God. We do a really good job of singing songs. But does our life match the worship that we sing? Do we worship God not only with our songs on Sunday, but with our lives throughout the week? If someone were to look at your life, your schedule, your relationships, your finances, your conversations, your work, would they say that your most important thing, your greatest treasure is Jesus? Would they say that your purpose looks just like everyone else's? Do you worship success, experience, relationships, and maybe being good because that's what you're supposed to do? If you worship the God of self-actualization, you will lose everything. If you think it's about living your best life and sprinkling a little bit of spirituality on top of it to make you feel better, you will miss it. But if you let go of all of that and worship the one true God who gave everything for you, you will find life, real life. So if it wasn't uncomfortable before, here's where it gets really uncomfortable. Because what are we going to do with this hard invitation? And I want to suggest some next steps. First of all, start with worship. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Delight yourself in God. As you sing these songs of worship, think about the lyrics. Think about what you are saying. Enter into his presence and find him beautiful. And this is more than just Sunday. This is the way we live our lives. Let your mind rest on God. And how do we find out about who God is? It comes from his self-revelation, his word. He tells us, this is who I am, and this is who you are. And when you feel that ache of beauty or sorrow, don't try to drown it out or distract yourselves away from it, but lean in and turn it into praise of the one who created all these things and the one who comes near in our suffering. And if you don't feel delight, you can bring that to him. Ask him to stir your heart towards him. The second thing you can do comes from a great theologian. You got to check yourself before you wreck yourself. You have to count the cost. Are you all in? And this takes some deep soul searching. Don't enter in too quickly. Don't enter in naively. Understand that it's going to cost you everything. Are you ready to surrender everything and find Jesus as your greatest treasure? Knowing that this is a daily decision and you're going to mess up, and he invites you back. And then lastly, ask Jesus to show you what you've been holding back. Is there something that you've said, Jesus, yes, I can follow you in all these areas, but not this one. Like, this one's just for me. Maybe you need to ask him to reveal that to you, but maybe you already know. Maybe you've been hearing it all throughout this message and you tried to push it down and ignore it because you don't want to confront it. Surrender and find him as your treasure. With our eyes fixed on Jesus, the one who said that you are his joy. We stop seeking our crowns and we take up our cross. Next Sunday is a special celebration. You've heard Chris encourage you to invite others so that they can experience the Jesus who changes everything. And this is where I feel convicted. Because maybe you're like me and you can be so bold in certain situations and so timid in other ones. When that fear of rejection or that fear of somebody not approving of you sneaks in and you shrink back. And so this challenge is for me to look at a world that is dying around me and say, come and see. Because Jesus has something more for you. And he's everything. I just want to invite our prayer team to come up. If there is anything that you need prayer for, maybe it's in making that next step. Maybe it's in praying for a changed heart. Maybe it's praying that you will grab a hold of that purpose. Maybe it's that you want to know that Jesus that we've been talking about. They would love to pray with you. Let's celebrate King Jesus. Let's celebrate him.